After being rejected by 3 different girls, Richard had seemingly given up on getting a date for the prom. He did not even show up to school anymore for the following 2 weeks, and people doubted he would even come to the prom at all. And why would he? Coming alone would just lead to endless more bullying. But Richard did show up, and when the other kids saw who he brought with him, their jaws dropped to the floor. The kids at school had no idea if they were going to see Richard again. He had been gone for 2 weeks by now and nobody had heard from him. They figured the shame of being rejected 3 times was probably too much for him. But they were very wrong. On the night of the prom, it was with one of the last cars to arrive that Richard showed up. And it was not just any car. He came with a stretched limousine that immediately drew everybody's attention. But what caught people's eye even more was who he got out of the car with. Walking confident as could be with an arm around his date, Richard walked down the red carpet into his prom. And all the bullies and girls that rejected him could only watch on in awe. Richard was new to this school. He had moved to this new town in the middle of the 2nd school year when his parents moved there. He was a shy boy, so it was hard for him to meet new kids and hang out with them. So he ended up being relentlessly picked on by his classmates. The thing that caused this problem was that all the friend groups had already been established by this point. So it was a lot more difficult for him to fit in with none of them. In this way, he ended up being an easy target for his school bullies. It was a tough year for him because he used to be well loved by his old classmates. Richard, he had not one just girl in his mind to ask for the prom, but 3 different girls. He was planning to ask them one by one. He wanted to have a kind of a backup if the first one was going to reject him. Those 3 girls didn't like him because they wanted to date him, but because they felt sorry about him and they wanted to make him feel better. So Richard decided to start with the first girl on his list. Her name was Millie. Millie was a very kind and cute girl. She was actually flattered when Richard asked her to the prom because she did not have a date yet. Even if she wanted to give a chance to this poor boy, she didn't. Millie was one of the most popular girls in her school, so she didn't want to risk his reputation for Richard. So she denied his proposal for the prom, but she wasn't so nice to him. Richard didn't give up and he asked the other 2 girls to be his date on the prom night, but he had not much luck with them too. Samantha was the second option for Richard. She was a popular girl with many friends. She kindly told him that she had found already a date to the prom. Amber was the last girl he invited to the prom dance. She was the only one who finally had the guts to tell him straight up that she did think he was a nice guy, but that she just did not want to be seen with him together. Richard ended up going home early that day. He felt defeated after the 3 rejections, but now it was too late for finding a date for the big night. Most of the bullies that had been targeting Richard for years now felt like this was a perfect argument to actually bully him even more, as Richard clearly still had some confidence left in him. Richard didn't expect what was going to happen in the next few days. The day after that, the bullies had already come up with a lot of plans to make Richard's life hell. They had so many ideas of humiliating him in front of the entire school. The day after that, the bullies had already come up with a lot of plans to make Richard's life hell. They had so many ideas of humiliating him in front of the entire school. The day they planned to do all these pranks on him, to their surprise, Richards did not show up to class, which was strange as he almost never missed a day. Those 3 girls who rejected him the other day had started to feel bad for their actions. The next days, they called his house multiple times and even sent an email, but they got no response. The days were passing by quickly and Richard did not show up for the next 2 weeks. But the people of the school had started to forget him. Nobody talked about him anymore. The prom night was 2 days from now and Richard was planning something that the kids of this school would never forget. But not everyone forgot about Richard. The ones that stood up for him in the first place did not forget him. They were worried about Richard and thought about the things that they could do to locate him. As they knew Richard was also into technology, they first sought for different kind of technology forums. Maybe he was active over there. Shirley, who was the one that initiated the search at first, found something on one of the forums. She read about a guy that was rejected for his prom and he was heartbroken by it, as he knew that the whole school knew about this situation, which is why he felt so embarrassed. This seemed like Richard, as his case was exactly the same. Shirley replied to the message with an alias, trying to find out if this actually was Richard. The person replied really quickly to all of Shirley's messages, so Shirley kept talking. Days passed by where they actually talked more than Shirley herself expected. But Shirley liked the conversations so much that she did not want to stop them. After a lot of hesitation, she asked him to meet her on short notice. But after that question, he suddenly didn't respond as soon as she wanted. So Shirley had to wait for a few hours before she got his answer. Luckily, the answer was yes. She was about to meet the guy that she talked to for weeks now. She waited at the park that they'd agreed to meet. So many questions rose to her mind. Would it be Richard? Shirley waited and waited, but he simply did not come. Shirley was really disappointed. After 2 hours of waiting, Shirley headed home disappointed, but then she got a text. He texted, but it wasn't the message she was hoping for. "I know who you are, Shirley. Don't look for me. I don't want to come back to school. Richard." Shirley was shocked by this message. She went to the police. Maybe they could locate where Richard was, as Shirley was worried that Richard would do something to himself. They immediately did their investigation. Luckily, he was still active on the technology forums, so they knew he did not harm himself. The whole week Shirley was nervous. Would she meet him this weekend at the prom? But she also felt somewhat guilty, as she already had a date for the prom. She did not want to make him upset again. On the night of prom, everyone partied and had smiles on their faces. Everyone seemingly forgot about Richard except Shirley. She could not think of someone else. But during the evening, all of a sudden, there was one last car. It was a stunning sports car. And more importantly, Richard stepped out. But he wasn't on his own. When Shirley saw him, she was stunned. Richard brought his grandma to the party. He wanted to show that spreading love instead of hate by bullies is a way more powerful message. Everyone had nothing but respect for both Richard and his grandma. Everyone had a fantastic evening, and Shirley was relieved that Richard finally showed up again. Richard and Shirley talked about the whole situation, with Richard apologizing for not showing up. Shirley accepted the apologies. And after Richard danced with his grandma, he asked Shirley for a dance, something Shirley obviously could not refuse, and something beautiful came out of it. Weeks later, after a few dates, they confirmed their relationship. They wanted to be around each other for as long as they could. They simply loved each other. Richard not only was in love, he suddenly became one of the popular guys at school because of his lovely gestures. A truly wonderful love story.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos, hit the subscribe button, and if you have something to say, please leave a comment.